Hello and welcome to today's CDCT live session. I'm Jason Rader. I'll be your host today as we dive into the topic of VDI and deploying remote workers. With me today, we brought a couple of experts in this particular category, and I am sure this is going to be a fun time. We've got with us Matt Darlington, who's a managing architect with us here, and Adam Morgenstern, who is a senior architect here with us at CDCT. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning. Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Excellent. So, why have you guys called this meeting? I'm just joking. Let's kick it off with defining what VDI is for the uninitiated, because I think that sometimes we say acronyms that we don't necessarily know what we're talking about. So Matt, why don't you take that?
Yeah. Well, Jason, I think the problem is VDI has become a catch-all for a number of different delivery mechanisms for apps and desktops for users. And so when you take a look at what virtual desktop infrastructure is, it's really getting the user to the app or the desktop or the data that they need in order to actually perform their job on a day-to-day basis. That could take many forms. What I refer to as delivery mechanisms. It could be a shared hosted desktop. It could be a true virtual desktop where you have a desktop OS instance running on a hypervisor somewhere in a data center. It may just be a virtual app, could be even a SaaS app at this point. You would be surprised how many people conflate all of these things into just VDI, right? Everything's just VDI. So
and that might have
complex.
Yeah, made it more confusing.
I'll try to make it a little easy.
Anything I can do.
Yeah. So no, and Matt's right. That's kind of the problem with VDI nowadays. It started. It stands for virtual desktop infrastructure. Let's start with what it stands for. And it's in its entirety of what it was supposed to be was basically a server in a data center, whether it's yours or in the cloud, didn't matter, running a VM with a desktop operating system on it that you accessed remotely. Now, whether that was remotely from your home or remotely from the office, it didn't matter. It was just not a physical desktop or laptop sitting on your desk. It was running in the data center. And as Matt said, it's changed into a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's morphed a lot in the last 12 years since I started working with it. Across VMware. VMware is not what it used to be in terms of virtual desktop infrastructure. It's much more comprehensive and flexible in terms of usability. It's probably, the most user-friendly from a administrator perspective.
Okay.
And they've made a lot of improvements in their underlying technology, which makes it more performant in certain circumstances. And then you've got obviously Citrix is probably the 800-pound gorilla, and Red Hat and Microsoft. It's still pretty crowded, depending on what your use case is. So that's what makes it so complicated. People think about VDI at a high level within an organization, at an executive level, I should say. And I think what they're really thinking of is it's just desktops. And so they tend to oversimplify what VDI is and what it's going to take to do it properly.
Okay. Now, when I was following, sorry.
Go ahead. No, please.
I was going to say, I was tracking with what you were saying earlier, but I think, to Adam's point, that's kind of where the complexities get, right? It's more than just that thing. And I think fair to say, and again, the experts out there are probably nodding along, but for the uninitiated folks, right? So VDI is using virtualization, but virtualization is not VDI. Is that fair to say, gentlemen?
That is correct.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, and I think, and I'm glad you brought up the players that are out there, because in my mind, VDI kind of associated historically with a specific vendor, but there are many vendors, right, that are involved in this process.
Yeah, I mean, Matt brought up the big guys, the big three, obviously, but there's a ton out there. I mean, there's a bunch of smaller guys that are doing it, and there's some bigger ones. I mean, Nutanix has a huge VDI environment it's growing, and there's new ones that pop up all the time. And anybody who's doing any type of virtualization probably has a VDI solution. Whether they're the first three you think of or not, maybe not this year, but then again, 8 years ago, Microsoft didn't have one, not in the traditional sense of VDI. So now they've got one, and I'd say they're top three.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
And
definitely top three. And the niche, I don't want to say niche because I don't want to disrespect, like WorkSpot is a cloud-based offering. It runs on Azure, but it's managed by WorkSpot, and they really have a specific market that they go after. So nothing with VDI is as it seems
okay.
at first blush.
Yeah.
And so you guys brought up some interesting stuff here, and I think in trying to kind of piece this together in a way where we can take a journey here, right? It sounds like, in my mind, if there's a lot of players, there's some big ones in the market that we always think about. There's some other players that are coming in and are gaining a foothold. It sounds like from a niche perspective or a specific use case, there's definitely a market for those kinds of things, because there's people that kind of want to your point, Matt, it's complex. People that want kind of something that's already dialed in for the very specific use case that they're looking for.
Yeah. If you like nerd knobs, then there's solutions out there that give you tunability and all the complexity and customization. Is not, they're not selling you complexity, they're selling you, customization, right? And tunability. That's great if you have a large IT staff, but if you don't, then things like Windows virtual desktops on Azure or WorkSpot or others are great solutions if you just don't have the staff and the time to deal with all of that. But when you start getting into like an on-prem, very large scale, several thousands to 100,000 users, VDI, that infrastructure and all of the integrations that are required really start making it look like a Rube Goldberg project at the back end. If you're familiar with that, that happens at Northwestern, puts that on every year. And if you don't know what it is, go do a search on Rube Goldberg at Northwestern. It's fascinating what they do, but it's not fascinating from an IT ops perspective. It's really frustrating from an IT ops perspective. And so, having spent 12 years in this space and done a lot in the consulting world, I used to go in and help customers simplify and fix these environments all the time. And it was from a consulting perspective, it was a great business to be in, because the one truth was, if you have desktop and app virtualization, you have issues. There's AD integration, there's network bandwidth, there's performance that gets affected by proper QoS or lack of QoS and things of that nature. So there's a lot of complexities that get involved in that. And if you don't have the staff to do it, it can overwhelm you, and you don't want that.
So those are great points. Before we talk about those complexities, because I definitely want to get into that, let's talk about why somebody wants to do this. So Adam, why don't you tell me what's the enticement? If we're already talking about there's some complexities that exist, what do I want to do this for?
Well, I mean, security and manageability. Those, I would say, are the two biggest reasons. We add into standardization, which of course makes manageability and security easier.
Yep.
So, when you're running a VDI environment, obviously people can have their own customizations, but everybody is running off of base ideas or base templates. They're running basically the same, back-end operating system that we've patched exactly the same across the board. I know it works, I know it doesn't, and I get to roll it back in case I put something out that doesn't work. So the management aspect of it, it's all in my data center or the cloud, whichever it happens to be, but it's all in one place. I'm not going to 10,000 users' desks across the globe and trying to push out a piece of software or, a Windows patch or whatever. So that management makes it easier. Also, when I say it's in your data center, whether it's, again, in your cloud or your physical data center, I've got that security that's my data center. I don't have to worry about a laptop getting left at Starbucks while it's unlocked because somebody went to the restroom, and boom, now whoever took it is inside my network and I can't do anything about it. That doesn't happen in a VDI. That VM is running in my data center. So if that does happen, which it could still happen, I mean, they make laptop thin clients, and you can connect to your VDI session from any laptop or tablet or phone. All it takes is one phone call to the administrator, and I can lock out and delete that entire machine. I can't do that with their physical machine. I mean, not if I got offline. You know, all your data is mine if I've got access to your physical machine. Not so much.
Right.
So
thank you. And you brought up another topic, and there's actually, so now we've pinned like 5 things I need to talk about. But so we're talking about remote access, right? And is VDI VPN? Is this all the same thing?
No.
I knew the answer. I was trying to figure out what you guys were saying. So for the uninitiated, tell me about the difference between VDI and VPN, or the relationship.
Well, I mean, so we still have some clients out there, and I think this goes against best practice. Just let me explain that straight up front. That use VPN tunnels to get into their data center and then have the user access a virtual desktop. That kind of defeats the purpose. It's doing things the wrong way. It's adopting technology requires that you adapt your processes and policies. If you just adopt new technology and you keep the same processes and policies, you're never going to reap the rewards. So that's kind of the first thing I want to put out there. But VPN is just a point-to-point tunnel between your user's laptop or workstation and the data center, and it's a single point of authentication. It's great. It can get you into what you want. Hopefully, you have other parameters and intrusion detection and things like that in your environment to help detect things. A virtual desktop infrastructure or a virtual app, generally you can use an application delivery controller to get in, right? And I don't want to talk vendors, but there's an example I want to use here. So Citrix has one, and they do a proxy into that environment using their own proprietary protocols. And that has single sign-on, it has multi-factor authentication, it gives you end-to-end visibility as to what's going on, whereas you don't necessarily get that with a VPN. Once they're in and they're using their resources, you don't get to see what all of that is. So you can use a VPN for this, but again, you're losing a lot of visibility and insight into what is actually happening. And from a security perspective, to me, that's a major problem, because you don't want just the administrative and logistical efficiencies that Adam spoke about in updating the OSs and patching and rolling back. You also want to reduce the attack vector and make sure that you can see, you have visibility into what is really going on. And to me, that's the difference. If you are implementing VDI properly with application delivery controllers, you get that visibility. And if you are kind of going old school because nobody's told you, you don't know what you don't know, then you're leaving yourself a little bit exposed. I hope that wasn't too complex.
and we'll let Matt go the complex, and I'll simplify it a little bit.
Yeah,
Adam, can you make it so I can understand?
So the biggest difference between a VPN and VDI is a VPN puts your physical machine that you have sitting in front of you at home, your laptop, on your corporate network.
Yep.
VDI is my virtual machine already running inside my data center, already in my corporate network. And you are just getting basically screen scrapes to see it. You're seeing what the monitor would look like. You're interacting with a keyboard and a mouse, but that's all it is. It's running in the data center. So it's running on those servers that are behind your firewall, that are behind your intrusion detection, all of that stuff, as if you were sitting at your desk at your corporate headquarters, if that's where your data center is, and using a machine there. And like I said, the VPN takes that laptop that you've got sitting at your desk at home or at Starbucks or wherever, and then puts it into your corporate network. Requires a lot more security, like Matt was talking about, to make sure that because I've taken a device from outside and allowing it in, that I might not have touched in weeks or months from a security standpoint or updating, patching, standpoint. It's a lot more security, that you have to look at. Where the VDI, I patch it however often I want to patch it. I'm not going to say weekly because people get, crazy and start doing things that often, but at least I'm keeping up to date with the patches. I know where they're at. A lot harder with VPN.
I
Well,
love the security focus. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
the other thing I was going to say is the question probably what's the difference between the user's compute experience when using a VPN versus
Yeah.
when in a VDI session. I think that's one question. The other one is then what's the differences between the application delivery controller, or the ADC, and a VPN, because that's really where you start to get to apples to apples. But to Adam's point, yeah, it's your data, your OS, everything is within your data center, and you control that. And so that's a big security benefit. The other security benefit when you start talking about looking at application delivery controllers versus traditional VPNs is that most application delivery controllers, you can set policies to, where you're looking for anomalous behavior. So if Sally generally is coming in from Topeka, Kansas to do her job and everything matches up, then she's going to get full access to everything that she should normally have, right? But if all of a sudden, Sally starts showing up in Kandahar, coming in that way over the internet, you're going to see that and you're going to be able to lock things down. And so there's a significant security benefit to being able to do those types of things on the fly by just having policies in place.
Yeah.
And so all of those things matter.
No, I like it. Inspection at the application layer as opposed to the lower, 2, 3, 4 layers that you would get with the other.
Correct.
No, that's good stuff. And I think so. Here's the business guy question. So it sounds like security, rock on, management, rock on. I can patch and control this stuff. Why isn't everybody doing this? It's got to be cost.
Comes
cheaper,
with a cost.
right?
It comes with a cost. VDI is more expensive. And I mean, it's more expensive than VPN, obviously, because VPN is just a connectivity method. So you still have to have that endpoint. But it's more expensive than just buying endpoints in general if you're starting out. Now, that's not always the case. And we have people come to us all the time.
My phone's going to start ringing. Be careful.
Yeah, I know. Everybody's going to come in. Now, it's not always the case, but in general, and we get this all the time, is somebody goes, I want to save money, so I'm going to VDI. Well, that's really hard to
manage
say.
expectations.
Yeah. I mean, the acquisition of the hardware and the software that's required, probably upgrading your networking, because now all you're using, it's the infrastructure in it. I mean, it costs a lot of money. Now, if you already have it, growing it is easy and significantly less expensive. But, so things like thin clients, they last for 10 years. You're not replacing them every 3 years like your laptops are. Things like that, long-term costs and the management. I don't need to have 20 guys running around in my office trying to fix laptops. Thin clients don't break.
And there's always been a lot of that, right, in the industry. I mean, when we started out, it was like, hey, the desktop is dead. We have VDI, right? Yeah. And the reality did not match the marketing. Right. Nothing was ready for that to be a true statement. I'm not sure it ever will be, to be quite candid. It's not just the infrastructure, right? The storage is the biggest part of it because you need to be really performant, right? What you cannot do is reduce the user experience, right? If they're getting really good performance right now, we need to, when we do desktop and app virtualization, match or improve upon the performance that a user's getting, which leads to another question. How do you measure that, right? How do you measure what the current performance is? How do you see what the change is once they're on their VDI session, right? Because people don't like to change, right?
Yeah.
And so if you make a change and somebody's, finds out you made a change, they're like, yeah, it's this new Citrix stuff. I don't really like it. It's not working, or it's the new VMware stuff, whatever it is. And so you need a way to empirically state, your improvement has been diminished. It has been improved. Here's the data support it, right? So let's get past the mindset of I don't like change, right? Because that's not good for the business. The business has to change in order to compete.
And there's tools that do that. I mean, there's tools that will measure, how long did it take to load this application? How long, what kind of frame rate are you getting on your machine? They're out there again,
Yep.
and that's again one of the other expenses that go into VDI. Can I slap up VDI and have it running in an afternoon? Absolutely. Will it be good? Oh no. It will not be. I mean, there's tuning that goes into it, and those applications that are out there to help you do that and to measure what your performance is, what your users are experiencing, because just like anything with the distributed systems that we're using now, unfortunately, most of us are at home. I don't know exactly what what you're seeing. How does your computer look to you? Well, I think it's slow. Well, what does that mean? And how do I understand that? So there's a lot of tools that are out there to help with that, and you basically you have to use them, or you have to really trust your user base to tell you when it's slow.
Right,
It's
right.
not.
But then we start getting into crystal ball type of technology, and that
Yeah.
doesn't tend to scale too well and give you predictable business outcomes. So
Yeah.
we do try to stay away from that.
Well,
Yeah.
I think so to me, and I think you guys would agree that pushing something out like this in the afternoon, probably a no-go, but the planning, maybe if the appropriate planning was up front, it'd be a lot more successful. Because in my mind, I'm automatically processing, well, you've got probably different classes of users, right? You've got some that super low bandwidth, they're going to be using Excel or something like that. And then you got folks that have, graphic intensive stuff. And will VDI work for those guys that need high frame rate, intensive graphic stuff, or is there a different solution?
Absolutely, it can. So you can't look at an enterprise of 5,000 users and say that they all have the same use case, right? So the people in your finance department are going to have a different use case and application set than the people in your design department or marketing marketing department. They're going to be far more graphics intensive, maybe creating videos and streaming sessions and doing things along those lines. So you have to. So proper planning prevents poor performance. We'll just that I cleaned that one up. That's used to be the 6 P. We'll call it the 5 Ps. But you need to go in and you need to assess what it is you're trying to do, right? What are the business requirements? And out of those, what are the use cases, right? How do I segment the users and understand what their technical requirements are to maintain or improve on the user experience? And then working with the business to say, okay, these are the use cases we've got. Which ones are the highest priorities? Where are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck in rolling this out? And so you have to do that work up front. And the challenging part with that is it doesn't matter if you're 300 users or you're 30,000 users. That upfront work is pretty much the same for any company if you want to be successful. And that's really where it comes down to. But to a point Adam made earlier, once you've made the investment in your version 1.0 VDI environment, when you move into VDI 2.0, when you go to do a refresh or you go to upgrade your operating systems, because just like we went from XP to Windows 7 to Windows 10, we're going to go from Windows 10 to Windows 2020 or whatever they're coming out with next. It's always going to be something new. But those challenges that you've had with those rollouts are going to be reduced by probably 80 to 90%. So you're going to get a significant return on your investment in version 2.0 and even more so probably in version 3.0. It's a shift in how you're doing business. So again, to Adam's point, if your focus is on cost reduction, this is not the path for you. If your focus is on modernizing IT operations around the end user experience, this is absolutely a great path to take. You just have to understand the difference.
Yeah, you're right, and I will add to it that upfront planning is not what you think it's going to be. A lot of people go after it and go, "Hey, I'm going to get the low hanging fruit," as we tend to go, "Hey, who's the easiest user?" We'll go after, maybe receptionists or people like that. They're not the easiest people, or they're not going to give you the best bang for the buck.
That's
And that's the biggest key is, up front, your initial investment is high. So there are other things that you don't think about that are really going to give you a better bang for your buck, better help for the end user. I mean, so one of the few things, one of the things that we don't think about is the programmers. Those guys have to compile code that sometimes takes 10, 12 hours to compile, and they walk away from their computer for the day. Well, guess what? Now that I'm going to have that code compiled on a server in my data center, which has 10 times the horsepower of your laptop. Oh, and then by the way, because it's VDI, I can give you as many VDI sessions as I want. So while that one is compiling, you can start working on this other project instead of calling it a day for today.
right.
So
Nice.
we do that. I mean, I've got scientists who are doing the same thing with astronomy packages. They had dedicated computers sitting in their office that would compile for a week at a time.
With
We
island.
upgraded them, put them on VDI, and one, it improved the performance because I could pack more hardware into that VDI session than you'll ever pack into a desktop that you can afford. Uh, and
Well, and
then they had three.
it's tunable, Adam. That's the whole thing.
Yep.
So marketing may only need this much in terms of graphics, right? A normal finance worker may need that much, but to your point, if you're a data scientist and you're doing, things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, and you need to crunch, moving that from under the desk, getting rid of that island of data, putting it in the data center, consolidating it, creating a larger data lake, if you will, and then being able to tune the amount of graphics you're given to a workload, right? Because one person, to use your example, trying to crunch that data in a 12-hour period, you can tune that and give them more graphics capability so that they can do it in 2 hours. And there are a lot of other solutions that you can put in your data center for those people to leverage that can turn that 12-hour or 12-day analysis process into hours or minutes. So
So
And it goes
it's
with data
modernizing.
locality too. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's running in the data center, I'm, high speed connected to my storage, which is high speed connected to my servers versus, that Wi-Fi connection in your office or at home.
Yeah.
If everybody's at home right now, for me to get to my data across the country, not that fast. My VDI session in the data center immediately.
Right.
no,
Yep.
I think
Absolutely.
so. The business side of me is like, are we doing this right? Where do we start? I think, so I think that the security, the management aspects of it sound very enticing. If you're in it for the long game and you look at the total cost of ownership instead of the acquisition of this, it sounds like we definitely make it work. And with the benefits, being able to pool resources and those kinds of things, and it sounds like there's a lot of good stuff. But where do we get started? And how much does my current infrastructure affect what I want to do? What advice would we give folks?
Wow. So where to start?
Okay, the
Wow.
30-minute answer. You have a 30-minute time
No,
limit.
the short version of it is it depends on where you're at, right? So if you're
Sure.
born in the cloud, this becomes a lot easier with things that you can turn up in Azure
So
and
we've said data center a lot. So I can do this completely in the cloud from an
yeah,
infrastructure perspective.
you
Okay.
can. You can even take the complexities out. If you say, hey, for whatever reason, I need these solutions. I know they're more complex than, say, a cloud-born solution purely.
Mhm.
But there's hybrids where Citrix and VMware will build and manage all of the infrastructure, the Rube Goldberg part, right?
Mhm.
And then have a VPN or express route connection back to your data center. And you and your staff are managing the servers, the applications, the desktops themselves, because that's what you guys know. That's where your wheelhouse is. Let Citrix or VMware or Windows or Microsoft with WVD or WorkSpot, let them manage that complexity. If you need to move quick, those are really good and much safer ways to do that than than trying to do that on your own if you don't have that skill and experience. But if you've already got a Windows virtual desktop, a VDI type of environment set up on-prem, and you're trying to figure out, well, how can I make this be what you just described? Because this has not worked that way, right? Then what I would tell you is you really need to start with the proper planning piece. Go back to the table and do an assessment of your entire environment. That doesn't mean looking at your VDI widgets and seeing how they're tuned. It means looking at how your AD structure is, what's going on with your network, how that routing is working. Do you have QoS? Are you load balancing, and are you doing it properly so that you're not overloading resources? There's a lot of things to look at, but that, if you're in a larger environment and you're not getting what you thought you were going to get out of it, I would start there. Does that not a 30-minute answer? Does that give you what
that
you
was
want?
good? Actually, not very complex either. So you're taking the managing out of your title now.
No, I think he's right, and I think the one thing that everybody has to understand is, as Matt said, it touches every part of your IT. It's your networking, it's your desktop support guys, it's your server guys, it's your storage guys, it's everybody. And unfortunately, we all know getting everybody in IT to work together and
That's a
be
cultural
happy.
shift. Yeah,
it's not always that easy. And the desktop support guys aren't used to working on stuff in the data center and on the servers. Well, guess what? Now you have to. It's not walking to Sally's desk and working on her laptop. So there's a lot. It's a cultural change, and it's getting everybody to work together, which is huge. But yeah, looking at what you have out there and getting everybody to actually talk, because the network guys don't tend to look at my bandwidth between my data center and my end user. That's not usually a normal issue for them. It's, how do I get to, between this data center and my DR site and the cloud and the internet? Those are what they're normally worried about. But if I've got 500 workers sitting in an office building, guess what? That one switch that, they all go back down to isn't going to handle it anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'll just say this, the clients that I've seen that have been the most successful with this type of pivot, right? Because it's a pivot from what you've been doing to where you want to be. So the clients that I've seen that have been the most successful with this have cross-pollinated their technical skills across teams, right?
Yep.
If you have a storage guy that's really deep in NetApp or Pure, that's great. But if that's his entire skill set, then his usefulness to your organization and your ability to move quickly to compete better in your market space is going to be very limited. You want somebody that is deep in one or two areas. It could be different areas of storage, could be different areas of networking. It could be networking and storage, but you need a broad skill set over top with softer skills, a better understanding of networking and security and AD. And if you have developed those people and you've cross-pollinated those skills, then you're ideally situated actually to adopt these things. And that need to pivot and cross-pollinate is a lot of the same reason HCI has taken off the way that it has, right? Because people can't afford to have a storage guy and a compute guy, and they just can't do that anymore in most cases. If you're lucky enough to be in an organization where you have that luxury, enjoy it while it lasts.
Well, I think I argue a lot about that compartmentalization, because not just from the affording that, but I think to our point is it's just like that there's so many of the newest technology. We get on this topic a lot. So many of the newest technology requires so much more of an integration of the teams across the business that it literally, that's the key to whether it's going to be successful or not. And I like that is, as we're talking to business folks out there, that's where leadership comes into play, because you have to have that guidance of, hey guys, it's more than just the IT guys. It's more than the desktop guys. It's more than the VPN or the storage guys, right? This has got to be everybody coming together to really get the most value out of something that's going to be expensive to start with, but we get the value out of it with it being integrated.
It is, and and I'll be honest, one of the things that Matt was touching on was if these guys aren't cross-pollinated in their skills, they're going to break things because I need to know as the desktop guy, hey, look, I run every day an antivirus scan programmatically at the same time. Well, guess what that just did to your storage array when I ran it on 2,000 virtual machines at the exact same time? See ya. And that's the thing, so they all have to pay attention. They all have to know how they're going to affect the other people because it's not just you anymore. It's everybody.
And that's a great point. You can stop doing certain security controls because you've gotten more security on this side. So again, everybody's got to kind of reevaluate the process and the technology.
One of the challenges and the things that we haven't really talked about today, which I think at least merits some discussion around it, is that we're talking about, well, if you're planning or you already have something, how do you do it? The reality is 2020 changed things for a lot of people really quick in unexpected and unplanned ways, right? And so we have a lot of people working from home. Most people seem to be working from home today. So secure remote access, desktop and app virtualization, all of those things were at the forefront, and it's like, let's go get it done. And some people did it very methodically, and they built on things that they already had. So they're probably in better shape than others. But if your organization simply had to react because it was react or die, then now is the time to go back and kind of do an evaluation to see, did you create any additional security holes and attack vectors for your organization that you didn't understand at the time or that you're not aware of today? Because in most cases, if you have to react and you don't have that previous experience behind you, you're going to create attack vectors, and it's not your fault. It's not your organization's fault. It was, this whole thing was thrust upon us. And so we're having a lot of conversations with customers about that today. And the other thing that we're getting from customers, which I think is very encouraging, is they're basically saying, and this really works for us. We did it because we had to. We would have never done this if it weren't for the pandemic.
Yep.
But this really works for us. And I can get rid of a lot of real estate now, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have to have 80% of my people can just work from home. They don't need to be here. We'll do it on a rotational basis so everybody gets some office time. But I can really shrink my footprint. And if you're in a place like LA or Philadelphia or New York or Atlanta, where you're paying premiums for real estate from a business perspective, that could be a significant cost savings for you that people don't think about. And when I was with Citrix, we used to talk about this all the time, and people would laugh at us. But they're not laughing anymore. They're the ones approaching us and saying, hey, we're actually thinking about doing this unsolicited. It's very cool that people are able to get past the mental barriers of the past to accept what the future could be.
No, I like that. And I want to kind of end on that. I think we had talked when we were talking about the topic before about people who did have VDI kind of dialed in before all of this, and it really kind of saved their bacon as they had to roll stuff out, as opposed to those guys who reacted and had to push it out. And now they're looking for round 2 of this to really kind of tighten it up. Do you guys have any anecdotes related to that?
I'll defer to Adam before I talk for another 20 minutes.
No,
okay, sorry.
mean,
Adam, do you have anything?
And that's a tough one. I mean, I don't even know how to go with that one. I will actually let Matt talk for 20 minutes on it, but probably only 3, because there's a ton on that one. So yeah.
No, I thought you were trying to say there wasn't any. But a ton is fine. It really did happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The issue isn't where do I find one? It's how do I choose one, right?
Yep.
Got you.
Well,
I don't need a specific one. I just wanted a confirmation that was the case.
It's totally the case. I mean, I've got a client in the manufacturing business, and when the pandemic hit, all of their designers and the people who actually produce the things that generate their revenue, they were dependent on very graphics intensive applications that were not being pulled into the back end data center. There were a lot of things not happening, but they had been pivoting towards that for a while. And because of that, they had all of the groundwork laid. And what happened, and this is interesting because a lot of businesses ended up falling off, right? They lost revenue, they lost market share. This particular manufacturer did not lose market share. They, in fact, gained market share because their biggest competitor was coming from China. And so they were able to take advantage of that void in the market by being able to quickly, improve what their designers were able to do. Not simply do what they were doing, but actually improve upon the user experience. And they executed flawlessly to not only keep their business going, but to gain significant market share that they're not likely to give up.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen similar things. Like I said, I had to think about how I wanted to phrase it. I think Matt probably said it better than I will, but it's an interesting time right now. Some people have been hit with it really hard, and they had to throw things out there quickly. Some were successful, some were not. Unfortunately, I've seen people who tried to go all in with VDI and didn't know what they were doing. Didn't have enough time to plan. They didn't know what they were doing because they've never done it before. I'm not, blaming them for it. They didn't have any time to plan it. They stood it up, and all of their employees basically had horrible experiences. Things didn't work. It caused them tons of headache. But at the same token, it was the only option they had. If your government tells you can't come to work tomorrow, well, you can't come to work tomorrow. So, we've internally stood up VDI in just an Insight and for our some of our offshore offices when they were told they couldn't go. We put up a couple hundred people in a hotel. And because that was the only way we could guarantee internet for some of these guys, and we stood it up in less than a week. And I promise you, there was not enough planning that went into it, and I know there were issues that were had, but continuing throughout, time in the last few months, they've improved it, and everything now works great. Luckily, we had the resources that not everybody's has to who's done it before. But I mean, the guys who initially put it up, they had never done it. This was, hey, how do we get it quickly and get these guys working in the next 48 hours? And then we'll go get the guys who are doing this every day to come in and make it what we need it to be. So, I mean, it's hit everybody, No,
I'd like to, and I think we should probably end on that note. I think that, the worst thing that, the worst time to try to figure something out is when you absolutely have to do it then, right? So it's something to be considering. I think, that planning process benefits you regardless of whether you go to VDI or not. I mean, it's just kind of that investigation related to different user bases. I mean, especially when you've got to have, if you're talking AI or some other stuff and you want just a giant rack of GPUs that you can use, no better way than to have that in your data center and be able to access that remotely so that those people can use those resources, or not just remotely, but from their desks and that kind of stuff. As opposed to getting maxed out machines on every desktop that you're going to have to refresh every couple of years. So I think VDI is cool stuff. It's been around for a while. It's matured. There's a lot of integrations that can happen. There are a lot of specific use cases that exist for if you want to, and there's potentially ways you can dip your toe in the water without having to invest in a lot of infrastructure in the cloud. So it sounds like there's a lot of cool stuff. And I think we've given some great tips to folks as far as, how to do it and the planning process. Any kind of final words, gentlemen, to the folks? Maybe words of encouragement?
Just start planning it. I mean, you got to look at it. There's a million options. We specifically talked about VDI and VPN. I know somebody's mentioned, profile session management. Very, very different than either of those two. And in certain use cases will work very well. Obviously, profile session management isn't going to work if every user is working from home on their own device. But if you're doing shift work, and you have people using the same machine, then maybe that's a very good solution. I can't say that it's the best for everything by any means, and it won't work for a lot of things, but it very much can work for that. But the only way to do it is to sit down and really look at the way your users need to work, not how they work. What do they need to work? Because we all work differently. I mean, I see what you've got in your background. That is way more monitors than I have. I don't need that, but I kind of want it now. So if we look at the way everybody needs to work, and we can see what options are out there and plan it out right and then implement it, you're going to be successful. If you just go in with an idea of, hey, I read a magazine and the desktop is dead and VDI is a solution and I want it next month, then things are not going to work for you. We've been reading that magazine for, I don't know, 8-9 years now, probably more than that. Don't think that this is going to be a quick thing. You need to be methodical and strategic and roll it out while you're testing it, because as Matt said, users don't like change. And if you don't give them a good experience the first time, then when you have to go back and try again, they're automatically going to dislike it.
Yeah, you may never get a second time is the bottom line with that. But from my perspective, to anybody out there that's listening to this and considering making any changes, if we want to be more efficient, if we want to gain a competitive edge in whatever our business is, then we have to improve the user experience. We have to enable them to do more with less, and that means less interruptions, less change to them long term. And the only way to accomplish that is to kind of modernize how you're operating from an IT perspective when it comes to the user experience. We've modernized a lot of things and we continue to do so. But it really boils down to, this is a modernization of IT ops as applies to the end user experience. And in order to really functionally pull that off within your organization, you must cross-pollinate those skill sets. If you don't, it's going to be to your detriment. I promise you, I've seen it over a 30-year career. It's not good if you don't make that pivot. And the last thing I would say is this, is when you go to make any of these moves, to modernize, to cross-pollinate, you as an organization and your individual employees are going to have to embrace being uncomfortable, right? You've got to be able to embrace being uncomfortable and still be able to functionally operate in that space. And if you can do that, then you can cross-pollinate and you can pivot to modernize your organization to become more competitive in your space.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, Matt, Adam, you guys rock. Thank you so much for the conversation today. And it's been enlightening. I hope you folks out there enjoyed it. And we appreciate the comments as well. And we hope we address those. If you have any other topics that you'd love us to cover, please feel free to comment. And if you'd like to see more of what we do here at Insight CDCT, please visit us at insightcdct.com. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you.